Hello and welcome to the Mind Body Soil podcast, a podcast where we explore the innate connection between the mind, the body and the soil. This podcast is proudly brought to you by Smart Soil. Smart Soil is an online education platform creating courses and providing resources from farmers for farmers. Join us as we share the stories and experiences from those dedicated to regenerating ecosystems, communities and human beings. This week on the Mind Body Soil podcast, we are joined by Khory Hancock. G'day, Khory.
David, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Bloody pleasure, mate. And love your work and been keeping an eye on you for some years. I believe maybe the first time I saw you was on Sunrise with Mel and Koshy some time ago as the environmental cowboy, was it?
Yeah, that was today. Yeah, today's show was as environmental cowboy. Yeah, with my bare ass on TV. Wonderful, it was wonderful.
Oh, mate. Yeah. So, how many years ago was that? And could you just take us through a little bit of your journey and how you've got to where you're at today, and why you've sort of are focusing so heavily on regenerative agriculture and as a solution for carbon sequestration?
Yeah, I guess you're asking why my bare ass was on national television. So I can take you right back to where I am today, to that point. So I come from a cattle station, 30,000 acre cattle station in central Queensland, near Carnarvon Gorge there. I grew up homeschooled, and I loved watching birds. I grew this sort of deep love for nature, and particular birds. I spent hours in the creek studying them, and had a little bird watching journal, like a proper scientific little journal I used to write notes in. But I never, you know how most people will make cubby holes to hide from the birds so that you can observe them in their natural habitat. I was never interested in that. I would place myself right on the water's edge so that they had to interact with me. That created a really unique experience where I got to interact with nature directly, and I observed the way that it interacted with me. So from a young age, I started to really understand the way that humans fit in with the natural world. That was really accentuated later on when I was about 8 years old. I think we went through a 6-year drought, 5-6 year drought. The water holes dried up. It was really dead everywhere. The birds stopped coming to the edge of the water. And at the peak of the drought, we got a phone call. I remember very clearly Dad getting a phone call at 4 o'clock in the morning, and it was from the neighbors. And it was the wife, and she couldn't speak. All she said was, "You need to come here." And so 4 o'clock in the morning, we drove to the neighbor's station, which was an hour away. And the husband had shot himself without a word in the middle of the paddock. That's not an uncommon story, by the way, but I remember it really rattling me because there was we were quite close with their daughter, who was a similar age to me, and I just remember the pure shock on their faces and the ripple effect that had throughout the whole community. Their whole family was very well loved, and it just really exaggerated that point of our direct connection that we have to nature. At the peak of the drought, he decided to do that because obviously, like, everyone was suffering with cattle and prices, and he thought that his family was better off without him. That is never the case, but we have a direct relationship with nature, right? So I think from those sort of experiences from younger, I naturally went into an environmental science degree at the University of the Sunshine Coast, where I became an environmental scientist, and I've been doing that for the last 12 years, mainly 10 years in the heavy resource industry, working for big mining companies, big blue chip corporations. I got some good leadership experience in top environmental positions there. And I basically thought that I can keep on heading down that track and keep on becoming a manager and general manager and the top positions in those big companies. Yeah. Or I could go down a different route and try and make an impact in the world. And I started up my own company in carbon farming, which I'd done a little bit of work in previously, which is basically a way to regenerate cattle stations and provide a supplementary income to those farmers, to those landowners, to diversify their income, which ultimately helps mental health. I've been figuring out, in the peak of the drought, the trees can still grow if they're resilient and you look after them enough, and so they still get the income off that regeneration. And so it's helping that financial stress, which in turn helps mental health. So I built a company around that as a carbon project developer. I'm running a few projects currently. At the moment, mainly in North Queensland. It's a very exciting industry. And to go back to your point about how I ended up on national television, I actually started a persona called the Environmental Cowboy a little while ago. I phased it out now because there was a phase of my life where I thought that I needed to do that. It was awareness, and it sort of helped project me into that space as an educator, as an expert in that particular area, in environmental regeneration, environmental science, etc. It helps with my public speaking skills, etc. I did a lot of MC keynote type jobs, and then they picked me up on national television because of that, which was a really good experience. I've done a couple of gigs since that, and I really love talking about the messages that I bring about reversing climate change and mental health, and that's kind of why the bare ass thing in a way. There was I'm sure you're aware of it, the naked farmer that was around for a while. Yeah, I was sort of involved, and I sponsored them for a little bit because I do believe in the mental health aspect. And
Yes.
the naked farmer, the motto there is it's tough. It's talking about mental health is tough, and so is getting your gear off. It goes along those lines. I can't remember. So everyone gets their gear off and talks about mental health. Basically, it's like an icebreaker. So I sort of made some videos of that, which they replayed on national television. They didn't tell me they were doing that, by the way. It was a look of shock on my face when I came on the screen. But anyway,
talk about getting put on the spot, mate. That's
I mean, it's a conversation starter.
Yeah.
And it can go whichever way after that. You can implement tools, and there are tools that I've researched since. I won't go into them too much now unless you ask specific questions about it, but it's more the one message that I really want to relay to improve mental health well-being is that connection back to nature. Is like spending time in nature, going for a dive on the Great Barrier Reef, climbing a mountain, walking through a rainforest, going for a swim in a waterhole. They're all things that directly connect us back to the natural world. And it's more of I don't know what it does to you. It can be explained in science, but it's almost spiritual. It cleanses, and there are scientifically proven psychological and physiological benefits of connecting yourself physically back to nature. Physically touching nature for more than half an hour can replenish systems and your central nervous system and physiological aspects, and change the biochemistry in your brain just by doing that, just by getting back in nature.
Absolutely.
And that that reconnection to nature has so many benefits from there, as well as as a civilization, we have actually disconnected ourselves from nature. Yes. Which has led to environmental destruction, because in the end, anything that we're disconnected to, we just don't care about enough. So the solution, one of the solutions to climate change, or the main one, is reconnecting ourselves back so that we actually care about it. All the solutions will come off the back of caring for something. That's the main message of mental health that I wanted to get across on the podcast today, is reconnecting yourself. Not only for your own personal benefits, but for the collective as a whole.
Oh, Khory, you've gone straight to it, mate. That's
straight to the heart.
That's beautiful. Yeah, no, and it's so true. It is really hard to care for something if you don't feel deeply for it or feel like you're a part of it. And I think, like you're saying, it is that division, not just in farming communities and in our social circles that we're going through today. People are more isolated than ever. Including farmers, and they've sort of been at the neck of that for quite a while. But yeah, it's bang on, mate. And what have you seen in your work with, what is the main mechanism in which farmers are being disconnected, do you feel? Is it because it's so mechanized now? the farming like in that larger scale, or do you feel like it's like you're saying, there's just not that educational piece there to really connect people back to country, or what do you feel like is the missing link out there from what you've seen?
Yeah, interesting question. I've done a lot of research into this. Two things I would say. The first piece is cultural, which I'm going to go into. The second piece is education. There's a lack of connection between that regenerative side and environmental. I mean, I've been in environmental science. I did 2 degrees and plus 12 years, and I still haven't learned anything. You know what I mean? So it's just, how do I expect anyone else to know what I'm talking about when when I've had that much learning and relearning, and you know, we come through these mainstream sort of systems in universities, etc., and you don't know anything out of university, so you have to sort of relearn stuff on the ground, and then relearn. So it's a tough, that education space, and there's a lot of misinformation also that happens out there. So who knows what to believe, especially if you aren't taught how to research properly. If you're just looking on stuff on Google, I mean, there's a million. It's like that old saying: if you've got a sickness and you type it into Google, I mean, you think you're dying, right? When it's just the worst way to research. You need to know how to get rid of some information and pick some information, like good source, reliable sources. But then it sort of goes beyond that as well. It goes beyond actual research on internet and peer-reviewed articles. It touches on indigenous philosophy. It touches on holistic management, not being able to see just one aspect, like just soil health. You need to be able to look at the forest and the way that they replenish. And you need to be able to look at the water cycle and the diversity. And then you need to be able to look at how cattle and crops can influence all that, everything. Environmental systems are complex, right? And we cannot comprehend the complexity of these systems. What we can do is set up a framework that allows the environment to self-organize. Charles Massey is very good at talking about this. He talks about setting up these frameworks that allow the system, and then nature will do the rest. Nature will actually self-organize itself to start regenerating. It is in every single cell in our bodies, every single living element of this environment is either regenerating or degenerating. We're either healing or we're dying, basically. So we need to set up systems that allow the natural world and each other to be able to heal and grow and progress in life. And so that's the first thing, is that education piece is not necessarily missing, but it's not prevalent everywhere.
Yeah.
The second piece is a little bit deeper. It goes deeper into our psychology, into our cultural barriers that we currently have. Charles Massey also talks about this, and the way that we colonized Australia, which is we completely dominated the Indigenous, completely came in, took over the country, basically complete slaughter of a human species. We are applying that same mindset that we did to the Indigenous back then to nature itself, and we have applied that in agriculture. We have created systems that have completely dominated the soil, completely dominated the forest. I mean, we literally destroy forests to grow cattle, and then expect it to work. I mean, yeah, it may work in the short term, but 20 years, 50 years, 100 years down the track, like we are now, it is clearly not working. Clearly, systems are highly degraded. Soil has lost, huge amounts of its carbon over the centuries, and nutritious topsoils, and deep carbon from the deep carbon that the trees are putting down, 30 meters below the surface. When you clear trees, that just doesn't happen. So of course we're going to get all these unintended consequences of a short-term agricultural output system. And that's what industrial agriculture is. It's about ego domination. It's about that mindset. And to slip into something that is more regenerative, to go down a different path, and the one that you guys promote at Smart Soil is about a different mindset. It's about asking ourselves different questions. It's like, not, for example, a question like, well, why isn't this working, to how could this work? Because our brain, if you just a simple change of the question like that, is like it's all poor me. The other question is like, oh, why isn't this working? Like maybe we need to put more fertilizers in it, like just chuck more of the same stuff at it. It's like, how could this work? Is a different, it sets your brain up for a different way of thinking. And you go down a completely different path, and you start looking at different aspects. You start looking at the Charlie Arnott's of the world, the Charles Massey's, the Paul Hawkins, and you look at and Bruce Pascoe, for example, you know, that indigenous side, and you start learning, and that learning experience is quite incredible. And Charlie Arnott calls it the regenerative journey, which I think is a really good label, just because it is a journey. Yeah. Like we are, you have to start somewhere. So you have to sort of get to that point where you realize that your systems are not working. A lot of the farmers that Charles Massey has interviewed, and I know this from human psychology anyway, is that people are reactive to situations, not proactive. So then there's a lot of the times there was, you know, an event in their lives to make them go down the more regenerative path where they just couldn't possibly go down that path that they were going anymore. Like they had a heart attack because they were just working so hard in the field that, you know, their blood pressure was high or whatever, or there was a huge drought, right? And so they didn't have any money to put in more inputs into their soils or to buy more cattle, so they had to figure out another way. So it's when humans have to do something, must do something, that they change. Generally speaking, yes. I think we need to be a lot more proactive than that, but that's generally what happens. And then it's a journey, and that journey, for me anyway, I can only speak from my own personal experience, has been nothing but progress and incredible joy and gratitude and opening up my mind to a whole other realm, a whole other world, and different people. You connect yourself with different people, forward-thinking people. There's nothing, it's less divisive and more unifying. I mean, you create these unique communities, you create these unique friendships, and everyone wants to talk about it, and they're all talking about it in a way that's forward thinking. That's like, oh, how can we do this better? What else can we do? Is this working? What's not working? And you all sort of get ideas and bounce off each other. So that there's nothing bad that I've seen that has come from that more traditional cultural mindset of my father did it this way and I'm going to do it this way, to thinking, well, how could I do it better? And even if it's just one step, like people think that this regenerative agriculture and the rest of it is just this huge, big step change, and you're going to go broke doing it especially for the first few years. And that's just not true. Just take one step at a time. My journey was one step at a time. Yeah. And I've gone through a personal healing journey over the last 12 months, and all that's the same for me in my personal healing journey. It's just like, I just took one step at a time. Okay, I'm going to go to the gym today. I'm going to do this at work today. And if I complete those two things, then I'm good. And I look forward to the next day. And the stronger I get, I can look forward to the next week, the next month, next year. So I start thinking in those small steps, which lead to big changes overall. I think that's the way that we need to approach, you know, if anyone's thinking about doing things differently or wants to do things differently, is don't think about it as like you have to go cold turkey tomorrow. Like you know, think about it as a one step-by-step sort of process. So yeah, I mean, I really recommend this to anyone, to just look at the systems that they've got in place, because and then try and look at the systems and try and set up those systems to thrive, because it only increases all the science that we're seeing behind this increases agricultural productivity overall. It improves your mental health and well-being. It improves your connectivity with not only community but your immediate family. And they're saying that it's improving profit margins longer term, just for the fact that you're not putting inputs in, or less inputs, and you're providing more nutritious, healthy food.
You're ticking a few boxes,
that's my perspective. Yeah.
That's a beautiful perspective, man, and thank you so much for sharing. Because like you say, there really is no separation. What you touched on there about your personal health journey, and you know, then that obviously, if you're working on yourself, you're feeling better, you're healthier, then that's translating into better work as well. More meaningful impact out into the environment, more connection with the environment. And that's something that we're really passionate about, is how do we cultivate that? How do we encourage more farmers to focus on that personal health aspect and then translate that into their on-farm health as well? So we really don't see there is any separation there between those two things. And really hoping to build some educational products and services out the back of these conversations, that assist farmers with that, because it's not an easy thing, and it's not something that's necessarily prioritized ever as a farmer. It's get out there and freaking work and bust your balls for 12 hours a day or 24 hours a day, who knows. And that's just sort of, like you say, the tradition of farming. Whereas if we can, like you said, design these systems and the framework to design towards open-ended health, I mean, it's doing the heavy lifting for you, isn't it? All those natural systems.
Yeah, and I think I sort of have taken that approach with my own company and the way that I run my own company too. And to be specific, and what I mean there is that I've come from, the Rio Tintos of the world, where it's very hierarchical structure. You report up, and it's very political at the top too. You play the game and you play by the rules kind of thing. And there's no partnerships. I mean, it's that hierarchical kind of structure. So I took on the approach in my own company to work with people, to partner with people. So there may be an overall leader. I'm the overall general manager, and so I may have that title, but I absolutely do not treat my staff members or my partners, business partners, like that. I treat them we are on equal playing terms. Like, I may make an overall decision to guide and write the overall plans for the company, but the decisions are made in conjunction with the other. I will take all perspectives into account. It is on partnership basis. There is no hierarchy structure in the way that I look at the company and everything. And so I'd suggest the same for landholders in partnership with nature, is that you have to look at it as a partnership. If you look after nature, it will look after you in return. And one of the other Indigenous concepts that I learnt this from, back from when I grew up, there was a theory growing up on our property that I learned about, because Dad was mates with Graham Walsh, who was Australia's greatest rock art expert at the time. He thought the left hand painted on the sandstone walls by the clan was a symbol for giving power back to the earth, and it was often associated around burials, so they'd give the body back to the earth. The right hand was for receiving power, so they could take from the land if they gave back to it. In every Indigenous culture around the world, there is a similar concept like this, like the Lion King's circle of life. They understood at that basic level that in order to take from land, we had to give back to it. We are now in a stage, it is very, very clear with climate change and the environmental devastation that we're seeing, and the extreme impacts that we're seeing across the world, that we are now in a stage where we have to give back, and a lot more than what we've taken, in order to be able to keep on taking. So that's the other concept that I try and incorporate into the company, is that it's I want to make it profit for purpose eventually, where a percentage of the profit goes back into a particular purpose, like a social, because I already do environmental stuff, it'll probably be more social, not environmental. But it's those type of concepts that are going to save the world, in quotation marks, from here on in. Yes. We need to understand those concepts. We need to it's not just about profit, it is about giving back, making it profitable, and making that sustainable longer term, but being able to give back and create more equality in the world through that sense. And we have definitely taken for a very, very long time now, and we are seeing the unintended consequences of doing that, which will be the extinction of our species if we don't take on those concepts more seriously. Yes. And I want to talk about the hope in a little bit, but the real science and the reality behind this is that we are not headed down a path of where humans will be able to be in a livable world, the current path that we're on. And so now, like, going back to my reactive and proactive, yes. And humans don't change unless we must. well, we must change now. Like we know the science is telling us the indications of the environment and all the extreme weather patterns that we've been seeing us. I mean, that's screaming at right in our faces now that we must change. And so we have to take on these concepts and understand what those concepts mean in a business sense. Yes. And what I'm suggesting is one of the ways that you can take on those concepts and what it means in a tangible sense is that profit for purpose type model.
Yeah, and I think it's really important at this stage while we're talking about such a huge subject as extinction. That's the ultimate consequence. So I think it's really important to underscore that this isn't coming from a place of hopelessness, like you're saying. There are solutions, and they've been here for a very long time. And like you're saying, the wisdom is there as well, like from the First Nations people. So it's all there, but all we need to do is, like you say, be proactive and start putting things in place. And I think it's really easy to get, I mean, for the layman that doesn't know a lot about this sort of space or about carbon farming or about soil or they're still believing the narrative that cattle are the problem and the reason that, which in some cases, a lot of that cow, it's not the cow, it's the how thing comes in as well. And obviously we probably overstocked much too heavily in the early days of settlement in Australia in that first stage, which didn't help things. But yeah, I guess what I'm just trying to underline there is that all the solutions are here in the sense that, and they're happening, like the work that you're doing and like all the amazing farmers that we are lucky enough to talk to. And so yeah, I just wanted to point to that, and I'd love to go into what you're seeing in terms of some of the results on these stations and the sequestration. And it doesn't take a lot of stations of that size or farmers to get on board this change. I mean, what is it? It's like a 1%. If we can build that soil carbon up by 1%, that would draw down all the legacy carbon that's up there. Is that correct, or is there something?
Yeah, not really realistic though. I can talk to that, but it's soil is a pretty risky business in terms of profitability. So that's the first point I want to make, is that to do a soil carbon project, I mean, soil hits a saturation point, and there's so many. If you're a soil scientist, and I'm not, but I've done a fair bit in soil science, so I don't want to touch too much on this, but there are huge complications with soil and with the drought, with floods, with fire. It can go up and down, up and down. So in terms of financial risk, soil is not the be all end all that everyone's saying it is. We have to look at this from a more holistic perspective. Yeah. Soil is nothing without forests. It would never will be. Pasture grasses can grow all they like. It's never going to get the carbon down to the depths that it needs to be. Forests are the way to do that. So we need to be thinking, look at the ecosystem as a whole. Like what was here before, what management techniques do we need to put in place to be able to do that, to allow that soil to flourish in conjunction with forests, in conjunction with the water cycle and everything. What we tend to do as humans is look at one aspect. Like some people say hemp's the answer. Some people say seaweed's the answer. The regenerative agriculture movement is definitely pushing soil as the answer, where it's not the majority of carbon projects around the world, around Australia. 85 to 90% of the carbon projects in Australia are currently the human-induced regeneration model, which is the forest, not soil. And because soil is incredibly risky and no one knows what's going to happen with it. It can go up and down, up and down. So you need to do it in conjunction with other projects, which is an integrated land management method coming out. So that touches on the soil. There are challenges in specific methods. So I just want to touch on that point firstly. The second point that you drew to is cattle. Cattle are definitely part of that solution longer term. There is a lot of misinformation by the podcasters out there at the moment that I get quite frustrated at, because they haven't set foot on a cattle station to start with, so they've got no integrity. And they just look at the peer-reviewed articles that are out there, And there's a lot of peer-reviewed science against it as well. Just might add, like regenerative agriculture there is peer-reviewed science out there, credible articles by CSIRO. All the carbon models that we use are developed by CSIRO over the last 15 years. They all use, like we use cattle to maintain long-term carbon and biodiversity permanence, which means once the forests are grown, you have to maintain, or once they are growing, you have to maintain that carbon permanence. And the biggest risk to carbon permanence, the carbon staying there locked up in that forest, is fire, right? And we've seen in the 2019, 2020 Australian bushfires, we have seen in the Californian bushfires, in the Canadian bushfires, and the Turkey bushfires. I mean, it's just, I could go on, right? There's just been huge, devastating bushfires as big as the Australian recent ones that have going on all around the world. That's because of two reasons. One, because of climate change. It is drying out, increasing temperatures, which is drying out vegetation, making it more explosive. The second reason is because the vegetation is being mismanaged. There's a huge fuel load, mainly through national parks, and we can reduce that fuel load through regenerative cattle grazing. Cattle can actually be used as an effective tool to reduce fire intensity, to make sure that when fires do come through, or when you do controlled burns, that doesn't get out of control. And what I mean by that is graze a paddock sustainably, mimic nature. So cattle grazing, regenerative cattle grazing is all about mimicking nature, all about mimicking what the bison and the African elephants and the giraffes do, is that they migrate around in the predator-prey cycle. I'm not going to go into that too much because I've done it on numerous times, and you can check out on my website, and I talk a lot about it on Instagram as well. But basically what you're doing with regenerative cattle grazing is mimicking what happens naturally in nature. And so the scientific theory behind that is that there have always been large herbivores on this planet, from the dinosaurs to the giraffes and elephants now, megafauna in Australia. They were put in place, and they were so large to reduce the amount of vegetation and biomass that is there, because no one was there to manage bushfires, right? And so when Aboriginals came along, when the Native American Indians came along, they managed fire. So therefore, the animal size reduced from megafauna, didn't need to come back, however you believe they were made extinct, whether it be from overhunting or climate change, probably a combination of both. It doesn't matter. They didn't come back to megafauna, right? They came back smaller. And so there's a scientific reason behind that. The evolution, or like in nature, the one thing that I've realized is that it always has a reason for doing so. And the reason that scientific, it's not just I believe, it's the scientific reason behind this, is that the mammals, the large herbivores, are becoming smaller because man has now managed fire on this earth. And so there was no need for that. But now we're mismanaging fire because we're all so scared of it because of infrastructure and other risks involved. So we need to understand, we need to incorporate Indigenous practices back into land, plus the best of Western science with climate change, temperature increases, and manage fire better. That is the biggest risk to carbon permanence, period. And so that's the second point to make, is that cattle definitely are an effective tool. And they are proven to be scientifically proven. We are proving it every day with it. Not only our carbon models, there are peer-reviewed journal articles out there, which people tend to ignore, by the way. Plant-based and vegan diet people I have no problem with, but I actually encourage plant-based diets. You know, it's a healthier option anyway to reduce meat intake, but it needs to be balanced. There needs to be a balanced argument, and we need to show the other side of the argument. The other side of the argument is never shown, by the way, and it's ignored, in fact, because people will tend to just select information that aligns with their point of view.
Absolutely.
I've always tried to be more balanced and holistic in my perspective and the way that I talk about this, but we need to start fighting a little bit harder to use cattle, because as a tool for bushfire risk, because like my projects are at huge risk without cattle financially. Yep. And not only environmentally, but financially. I lose all my carbon. My carbon income is based on regeneration working. Yes. And so there is no real bias there, because I'm trying to get the area to regenerate. I'm trying to prove that biodiversity is increased. If fire wipes it out, that is all my income, projected income, gone. So I'm trying to do everything that I can to make sure that the carbon project works right. So that's my sort of, I have a piece of the pie. So I am heavily invested in making carbon and biodiversity work. I will do whatever I can to make it work. So if someone comes along and proves to me that cattle can't do it, so be it. But at the moment, cattle can do it, and we are proving it. So we have to be really clear on that point.
No,
There's
thank
a
you.
third
Thank you for highlighting that. That's good.
I just had to highlight that bit. But the third point that you sort of made there, you touched on, is that there are a lot of different solutions out there. There definitely are. A really good example of this, if anyone wants to look at it, is Project Drawdown. It's called 100 Solutions to Reverse Global Warming. There are 100 solutions that they have highlighted with the profit margins and the savings that you can make. They all prioritize from 1 through to 100. Regenerative agriculture is sitting in the top 10, I think, of prioritized solutions for climate change. Yeah. And so they're saying they're using the IPCC reports, the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change report, which is the main peer-reviewed report on climate change that comes out, which is basically said we've got 10 years to reverse the impacts that we're having on the world in terms of climate before we start to get runaway climate change, which means that the climate is speeding up so fast now because of all the positive feedback loops that are happening around the world and being triggered, that there's nothing we can possibly do to slow down that warming. So we've got 10 years to slow down that warming. So they've done a project called Project Drawdown. If we did all these 100 solutions at once, we can not only slow down climate change, but we can start to reverse it by 2030, 2040. So we can completely stabilize the climate in 20, 30 years, which is quite incredible. And that's why when that holistic perspective needs to come into play, is that, you know, everyone screams out, soil's going to be our savior, seaweed is going to be our savior, cattle are going to be our savior through regenerative ag. It's like, no, not any one of them will be, but all of them acting together will be. Yeah. Like it is, and that's the hope that I want to bring. Yes, we're on a bad path. We're on a really, really bad path, a trajectory where we will hit runaway climate change, and even by 2050, no one knows what the world's going to be like if we keep on heading down that path. It certainly won't be livable for humans, whatever humans will be left on the planet. But we just don't know. So it's the unknown is very, very real risk. And I want to be clear on that. But the hope is very real as well. This is a simple mass solution in the end. The carbon dioxide that we've put into the atmosphere right now that is warming the world needs to come back down. It can come back down through those regeneration methods, through regenerative agriculture, through seaweed farming, through soil carbon projects. I didn't want to wrap on about soil carbon there and say it's all bad. It is part of the solution. I'm saying it's in part of the solution more in with everything else. So all of those together can actually, like what comes up must come down. The mass equation works out, it checks out. In that time frame, if we implemented all these solutions at once through these scientifically regulated methodologies, through landholders primarily, agriculture is the only industry in the world that has the ability to draw that carbon dioxide back down at scale. So landholders, farmers are the solution. And that's the other clear point that I want to make, because we often harp on about farmers being the problem and agriculture being the problem. Well, that's what I'm talking about in terms of the mindset shift. It's like, stop thinking about it as the problem, because they're the only solution that we currently have. So we need to think about, we need to just change the attitude completely and just say, well, instead of like going, oh, what could go wrong, ask them what could go right. Yes. Like what could go right in implementing a soil carbon project? What could go right in implementing a forest project, a seaweed project, a regenerative agriculture project? And then we put the framework in place to allow that to happen. And everyone benefits of it, both financially, socially, environmentally, longer term. So I think there's nothing to lose from this. It's all win-win-win. There's also a lot of money in it at the moment. The carbon price is skyrocketing because of the policies and the frameworks and the current trajectory of the climate action that's going worldwide. Yeah. So capitalism is an important thing because it'll get everyone on board really quickly. No one, generally speaking, does things out of the good of their heart in terms of large scale environmental projects, just for the fact that it costs so much and it's so timely and consuming. But when there's money involved, every man and his dog will get involved very, very quickly. And we can turn this around very, very quickly using capitalism to our advantage. Because culturally speaking, going back to that cultural issue that I was talking about, I mean, it took us 10 years to say yes to gay marriage, right? It was a decade of talking about it, and it was a yes or no question. This is climate change, and all these different issues we're talking about is not a yes or no question. It's highly complex. So we don't actually have 10, 20 years to sort through this and culturally change. So what I'm saying is capitalism, we can use capitalism to our advantage. We all like to profit. It's all part of us. We all like to save money. Saving money is a part of capitalism, the capitalism concept. So what I'm saying is that we can use that to our advantage to speed up the regeneration process. There's money in it now. Let's get in on this gold rush now, regenerate what we need to so that it can be done in time to reverse the climate shift, to counteract it. Because we don't actually have time anymore. We're out of time. All these projects have to be done at once. But what I'm saying is the carbon price is that high right now that every man and his dog can be involved in this, can profit off it, can benefit off it in some way, shape, or form. And we should be doing that. We should be very excited about it because it is an exciting, fast-changing industry.
Yeah, and I think it now would be a really good time to really highlight what it looks like for a farmer to engage in a carbon project. I think a lot of them are still sitting on the fence in terms of, watching what happens, watch this space. But and maybe for some of the reason they feel like they're going to have control taken away from them. And like you said, not having a real input into the overall framework or what has happened to date. So in your thoughts, how's it look currently, and what are some changes that you would like to see in the space to make it more, I guess, more inviting for farmers to come into carbon farming?
No, I'm going to be completely transparent and honest. I don't think there's anything else that needs to change right now. We sort of been that is the sort of saying is that, oh, watch this space, like it's coming, it's here, it's now. What are you waiting for? The methods are there, the money is there. You've got carbon service providers to help you with all the reporting, all the admin work, which is what I do, and all the additionality that's required to make the project eligible, such as putting in more fences, more watering points. It improves your property overall. We're aiming for agriculture and productivity increase, as well as environmental biodiversity and carbon increase. So that there's like, I know I'm coming from an invested, potentially biased perspective, but that, like, coming from a cattle station myself, this is the reason why I got into this, is that it is agriculturally, to do this, it only complements agriculture and your business. There is no downside right now. I cannot see a risk. The risk is that a massive bushfire comes along if you're being negligent, and you haven't managed bushfire properly, and it comes down and wipes the carbon out. Then you'll have to pay back some carbon credits. But if you're not being negligent, if you put a proper fire management plan in place, then you just have to regenerate that area back up to where it was before. You don't actually have to pay back any credits. And that's the major risk to these forest regeneration projects I'm seeing at the moment. Not anything else. So that's been completely transparent, is that, like, yes, there's improvements to be made in the industry, like any industry, by the way, but they're nothing major. The frameworks are there. It's all there. So the question that I would ask now is, why are you sitting back on the fence? Because you're missing out on capitalizing on that opportunity. That I really can't say anything else to that. There's nothing else that needs to be drastically improved in that regard. It is a good, solid industry with really good frameworks that are working. So if something's working, something's been proven. There's hundreds of carbon projects in Australia right now. It's a proven working model. Yep. You're missing out if you don't do it, and you need to have a solid reason for not doing it at this stage.
So are you seeing adoption increase then over are people jumping on board then? I imagine it would have been quite a hard slog for a while there, and
I think everyone took it up really quickly in those early days because it was a bit of a gold rush mentality. I think there's been a bit of a slowdown period where people questioning the risks. Yeah. Now that the carbon credit price is going up drastically.
What
and
is
there's
it at
more
the
people.
moment? Sorry, Corey.
It's the spot price is sitting around 33 or something like that. It went up to 50, $60 last year, but it's sort of stabilized a bit now. But it like the projections are that it's slowly increasing over time. You can get all these different things now, like you can get a premium carbon credit if you prove like social and biodiversity benefits. They're called carbon co-benefits. So you can sell the carbon credit price at a premium on top of what the carbon spot price is already worth. But basically, people are paying whatever they think they're worth at the moment. It's a pretty voluntary sort of fluctuating market, which some people perceive as a risk. I invite it, to be honest, because people will buy what they see the value, if you know, and it depends on the project, whether you've got good biodiversity potential or you're employing Indigenous or whatever it is, there's good social benefits, and they will see that value and they will pay for that value, right? So there's no plus downside at the moment to the pricing mechanism. Which there was before. Previously, there was before, and people were just signing up on long-term sort of government contracts.
Yeah.
Now there's no government contracts. It's just a contract with your carbon service provider, and that can be a flexible contract as well. You know, you can get the price on a year-to-year basis, or whenever you sell the carbon credits.
Righto. So there is that flexibility there, and I think just again, I'm not heavily versed on the space, but I've certainly been keeping an eye on it, and I guess I've been a little reluctant to promote it because I've still been of the mindset that, you know, it is that lock-in government contract isn't flexible. But to hear there is that flexibility coming in, and that farmers are getting a say, and that there's all these co-benefits. I mean, is natural capital accounting being factored in now? And I know there's some really cool work happening in that space.
There is, but there is. There's lots of different things happening at the moment, which is incredible. But in terms of the strict, like the straight out carbon projects,
yeah,
I mean, there's no government contracts. There's no lock-in fixed fees unless you want it, like a fixed carbon price fee, unless you want it for security. But what I'm recommending to my clients is don't fix the fee. Wait to see what the spot price does and get the best price that you can, because it's dramatically increasing. And it's said to, I mean, everyone's saying that the demand for carbon credits, which means the demand for these regeneration projects on cattle stations and crops are just going to be huge, phenomenal. So people are screaming out for this. It's not going the other way. It's going one way. And that one way is going up and uphill fast. So when we talk about climate action and all those 100 solutions to global warming that I just mentioned, then the demand for that, someone needs to pay for that, and that will be done through the carbon farming frameworks. This industry is not going away. It's getting stronger and better. And the framework's already there, is what I'm saying, is that the industry can only go up from here, and no one can really bring it down. That's human society doesn't necessarily get worse, it gets better. Most of the time, especially with industry. So it'll only improve. But what I'm saying is it doesn't need to improve drastically from here, is that there are only benefits at this stage to landholders. There are risks, sure. There's risk in cattle, right? There's risk in growing.
Farming's risky. Yeah, exactly.
Farming, yeah. I mean, and the farming risks apply to the carbon risks. So whatever happens in farming, if you go through a big drought, I mean, that's unforeseen in farming. It's unforeseen in carbon too. So you're not, I mean, you lose your income for that period, or a percentage of your income. You don't have to pay back credits, but you should, like if you have trees or whatever, the trees are normally resilient unless it's a really horrific drought. Trees will keep on growing. So you keep on, if you look after them, so you keep on getting that carbon credit price through those droughts, which is why I was saying, like, to diversify your carbon, your portfolio, your property portfolio is a good thing. So that when a drought comes, when an extreme weather event comes, you're not thinking about going out in the paddock at 4:00 in the morning and shooting yourself. You know, you have options.
Yes.
And so this is why I'm so strong on this. I mean, I did take a huge risk myself building my own company and self-funding it. This whole last 12 months, I've self-funded the entire company to a point where I'm I'm in a position where I can get funding now to keep on going. I've got projects, but it was a risk for me. And the reason why I took on that risk is because I believe in this. I believe in this from a social perspective. I believe that it'll help people. I believe that it'll help environment and agriculture longer term. It's a partnership between those three things: the social side, the economic side, and the environmental side. And agriculture sits right smack bang in the middle. So I just can't I can't see a downside to this. I think farmers, landholders have to be asking themselves the question: it's like, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you at least looking at it and seeing if it's an option for you? Because it's not an option for everyone. They may not be eligible,
Yes.
but you need to do the assessment. You need to go to carbon service provider and do the assessment to see if it's actually worthwhile doing to begin with.
Okay. And so what sort of scale would be applicable, you know, like what sort of acreage are we talking?
Yeah, it depends on each area. The
Okay.
higher the rainfall, the smaller the property you can go. It depends if you have enough area to plant trees in those small areas. Normally, like the projects I've got at the moment, you're talking like, 60,000 to 150, 200,000 hectare cattle stations.
Yeah.
But like then sort of lower rainfall areas, in higher rainfall areas, you can go smaller as long as and there's different methods. So that's what we do. We will assess the methods that you may be or may not be eligible for, and we'll give you a report back and say, well, it's eligible for this or it's not eligible for that. And this is your projected carbon income over the 25-year project period. And so that you can have some hard business numbers in front of you to see exactly what carbon is there, exactly what method you're going to use, and exactly what you have to do in order to make sure that that carbon income comes in. So that's what I built the company for, is to do all that, to help landholders, to help farmers set their carbon projects up. And then we just take a portion of those carbon credits as they roll in. That's the business model, is that we value the carbon credit as well. So you won't pay anything for us up front, is the main carbon sort of business model that we go down. But once we prove that there's carbon there, we can sell those carbon credits on the market. We'll propose a percentage to you, and we take our percentage and you keep the rest.
Amazing. Now, Khory, I'm going to shift gears a little bit out of the carbon,
Yep.
specifics and go into, I know that I did see a post on your Instagram, I think a while ago, where you had taken yourself out onto country and knowingly switched off all your devices and did a bit of reconnection. And I'm just wondering if that's one of your ways, but what is the best way that and some of the tools that you've developed to cultivate that connection to country and to nature and to recharge your batteries?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I do a lot of diving, free diving, not scuba diving, where you actually have to learn to you hold your breath underwater, but you have to learn to be at one with the ocean. I do a lot of walks when I can, like into rainforest, the Springbrook National Park, not far from where I am. I love going there just to reconnect, and don't take my phone with me. I just disconnect. But in terms like of a longer journey, I've been learning a lot about myself recently, and I guess like I've been through, I would say a large amount of trauma in my life. Probably not. Well, I don't want to compare myself to other people, to be honest. But everyone has their own traumas. I think is the point to make, is that we all have things to deal with, either from our childhood or relationships, current relationships or past relationships, and we tend to project that trauma onto other people and other circumstances because it's unresolved. I hit a point in my life where I definitely realized that I was doing that. There was a lot of built up energy, unresolved energy, I would call it, inside myself, and I was just not going down a path that I wanted to go down. And so I had a big check where I had to reset, and I went on my own. So I talk about the regenerative journey, and that was my personal regenerative agriculture sort of learning. It was more from a professional sense. And I'd always been very hardwired to think professionally. Now I was sort of like going, okay, well, I've been very career orientated, very ambitious for a long time. That has had personal consequences elsewhere. There's cracks that show up, right? When you're so ambitious and so focused on one thing, it goes back to the holistic perspective.
It does, yeah.
When we're focused on one thing, other things open up. There's cracks. We miss stuff. That was what was happening with me. So I went back and I took a long. I went on so I'll take you through the journey of what I went on the last 12 months. First of all, I got a dog. Because I'd been so single for so long and so driven on my career. And to be fair and give myself credit, it was all my success in that space was absolutely probably all me. I mean, people helped me and mentored me along the way, but it was absolutely my goals, my ambition, my work ethic that got me to where I was. This time, this was a different thing. This time it was more about, I couldn't do this by myself. I couldn't work this out because I actually didn't know what was wrong to begin with. And I thought the first thing to do was to get outside of myself, because all my decisions were hardwired to think about me. Like I would not contemplate anyone, any friends, any families, any girlfriend into a career-based decision. I'd be like, I'm making this decision regardless of what you think or what you like, whether this impacts my relationship or not, you know. So there was a certain amount of selfishness that was built into me. It got me a very long way in career. It doesn't get you very far in personal relationships. So I had to sort of rethink about that. So I got a dog to think about something else other than myself and to learn to love again. She helped me get through a lot. I swear to God, that dog saves me. It gave me a reason to get up every day, and there was fears. I've got real fears, by the way, of having a dog or falling in love with anything. Growing up on cattle station, I'm sure you know about it with poison baits and everything. I mean, I had a lot of dogs that, especially one in particular, that I lost to poison baits at a very young age, and I just, all those type of traumas. I had nightmares getting this new dog. I had nightmares every night of losing her once I started to like love her in that same way. So I had to get over all that, it's all trauma. You have to get past that because you don't have a life if you can't love. Yeah. So I had to work out how to get through that. And I went on a big journey, like a 4-week, not a big journey, but I had a camper trailer, I bought a new camper trailer, and I went down south with no real plans. I was just like, I'm going south. I could end up in Tasmania, I could end up in South Australia. I had a couple of people to interview along the way. I did interview Charles Massey and Bruce Pascoe, who I'd wanted to get for a long time. So I did a bit of that, but I just had this camper trailer with the dog. I did a lot of sitting on the beach at random spots in rivers. I went exploring some of the caves and national parks. I did all the drive through there. I saw the horrific bushfires. I documented stuff. That was more of a spiritual journey. It was more of a like, okay, right, what am I going to do now? I'd resigned from Rio Tinto and the rest of it. And I was like, okay, what's my next steps? I'm not going back to that heavy resource industry. I don't believe in that anymore. I mean, it's not that I really liked working for them and all those other companies. But it's like, it wasn't my path anymore. So what is my path? And I didn't think my path was working for someone else either. And so if it's not working for someone else, then you've got to really seriously think about your next steps, because starting a business is a big, risky move, and you've got to be 100% committed to it, heart and mind and everything. So I took it some time out, to be honest, to think about that. I came back and I'm like, right, I made a definitive decision. Right, I'm going to go ahead. And I just took it step by step then. There were some serious challenges that I had to overcome, both professionally and personally throughout this year, especially competitor-wise. There was a lot of competition, a lot of people pushing against starting up my own stuff. And, just things like that happened along the way that I had to push through. And I set myself up with friends. Like I've got a couple of girlfriends and a couple of guy friends, probably 4 people that I can name on one hand that would have my back no matter what. And so I think for me this year, having worked really, really hard for a long time, I had to step back and really take a more balanced personal look on life and look at so that I could be more balanced in myself and not be so driven
Yeah.
and burn myself out, like I was before. So I spent a lot of time with friends. I spent a lot of time on my health, just getting my health, my physical health back up and up to scratch. And then I took it step by step. Like I was saying to you before, just one step at a time. It's like if I achieved one thing that day, then that was a good thing. And then I just built up over time. And there was a point in time, like, and it's been really recent, by the way, in the last couple of weeks, where a couple of things happened and I didn't react, whereas I would have reacted in the past in a undesirable way. And I didn't react to these situations. And I just took a step back. I didn't even want to react, and I just walked away. And I just took a step back and said, I've healed that part of myself. And it was one of the most beautiful moments for me personally. I think it was a big achievement for me because I didn't think there were parts of me that would ever heal, that I would always be like that. And all of a sudden, I could walk away from a situation that I wouldn't have normally walked away from, and I would have given them a piece of my mind, etc. And I was balanced in myself, and I thought, well, wow, whatever I did for the last 12 months has worked to some extent. And I think to reflect back on that, and for anyone else who's going on their own journey, I did a lot of reading as well. The holistic psychologist got me through a lot of that childhood trauma, a lot of that unresolved stuff. But for everyone, it's going to be different. I think the point to make there is that don't follow just my path. There's some suggestions in there that might work. That works for me. I've done a lot of meditation previously. My life was always very structured. I'd get up in the morning, meditation, yoga, then I'd train, and then, I'd work for 12 hours, and then I'd go back and I'd read for an hour. Like, it's very, very structured. I didn't do any of that this time. But now this time around, I was very relaxed, and I think that's the point to make for other people, is that your journey is going to be different, and it'll be different for everyone's kind of thing.
And some people need that task orientation or that really structured, routine or whatever to get through. And I think that's healthy in some aspects, but like you say, to have that moment of just reflection and almost like surrender in a sense. It's like, okay, like this is it, like, and reconnect and reboot. It's a really powerful thing.
Yeah, when you realize that, I always used to hate that saying, whatever is will be. Like, I used to hate that because, like, oh, well, you can't control it. You need to be able to get out there. And there are some situations you can influence to your benefit. And you need to understand how to do that. That is an important part of life, right? Is influencing. You need to be able to communicate. You need to be able to influence people and situations down the path that you want to get a better outcome for everyone. But like, you can't control where other people are at in their life. You can't control the way that they react. You need to be able to control the way that you react. And so if a situation isn't going anywhere, if the conversation isn't going anywhere, you need to be okay to say, well, it is what it is. I'm going to step back here. I'm going to let this go. I'm going to accept. And I could never do that. I could never do that. And I needed to fix that. I absolutely needed to fix that. And I did. I fixed that part of myself. And I'm not saying that I'm going to be perfect from here on in, but I'm saying that part of me is resolved and healed. And there will be situations where it'll still piss me off with some people.
You're human after all, Khory.
Yeah, but I know how to deal with it now, is what I'm saying.
Yes.
But that journey is going to look different for everyone, I think, whether it be structured or a little bit unstructured. But for me, I was very, very structured for a very, very long time, and I had to go the opposite. I had to go with the flow a little bit. When people say go with the flow?
Yeah, totally.
I don't know what the fuck that meant at all. Had no idea, but I had to learn. I had to learn how that worked, and now I go with the flow a little bit more. I'm still structured because you have to be, but I go with the flow a lot more than what I used to. That's for sure.
Good on you, mate. And I think that's the journey we're all on, isn't it? How can we go with the flow? I don't know what everyone believes in, but the universe is extremely complex, and all these conversations and people you meet, and sometimes you do feel like, there is a higher purpose or something happening behind our actions, and we're being driven, if we're listening, towards certain things, so it's really interesting, and it's thank you for sharing on such a personal level.
Yeah, thank you. Well, you picked up on another point there that I didn't mention, but I'd only listened to myself for a very long time too. I'd learned off other people and other people that read books and stuff and learned, but I wasn't listening to other perspectives necessarily. I was blocking them out. This time I had to pick a few people and listen to a few different perspectives that I hadn't necessarily listened to before, and I had to open myself up to that with no ego, no bias.
Yeah.
So that I just wanted to touch on that as well. Is that's the other important part to it, is that you have to listen this time.
Yes.
Is like, if something's going wrong in your life and you know it's going wrong, then just take a backward step and take it in. Like, listen to someone else and really listen. I'm not talking about just hearing. I'm talking about like seeing it through their perspective, like trying to get yourself in their boots and see that side of it. Because if you see that side of it, you'll see a more full truth, and then you'll see a more true path forward. Because if you're just looking at your perspective, or if you're just purely looking at their perspective, then neither is helpful. But if you take both of them into account, the truth and the path is often somewhere in the middle. So you just go for it in that way. And I had to learn how to do that too. So nothing from taking both the regenerative journey and the personal journey I've been on, it has only benefited me. I think we need to remember that we are human. We do make mistakes. It is not necessarily the mistakes that we make that will define us ultimately. It is the way that we move forward with it, and that we react to those mistakes and progress our own lives, and how we treat others moving forward, that really defines us.
Absolutely.
And yeah, so I mean, I think that anyone struggling out there in that sense, and they're dwelling on their own past or their own mistakes, I mean, Jesus Christ, I've made some, and
forgive yourself.
You have to learn to forgive yourself, and love yourself. I didn't really know how to love myself or forgive myself. You have to, because if you can't forgive yourself, you can't love yourself, then you have no way that you will love anyone else in the same way that they deserve. So the work on yourself first is the most crucial for your entire life. I'm working this out at 34 years old. It's late in the game, but I don't think it's ever too late, really, to work this stuff out.
I'm sure there'd still be 60-year-olds and 70-year-olds that are still just clicking onto this now, so
and it's the beauty of it is, though, too, is that it's never ending. It's always learning. You're always learning something new, and totally. The work for me is not done. It is still ongoing. So that's actually the beautiful part of it, is that I still have stuff to learn. I still can grow in ways that I wouldn't have grown in normally. And I have an opportunity to do this, and an opportunity to do this like through your podcast, to try and touch someone else's life in a positive way, make an impact, and through my own company or through an interaction that I have. And I read through a book recently, just to sort of touch on this quickly. Brooke Blurton, I read a book from her recently. And she talks about love in a really unique way, is that it's not this big grand gestures that we try and make up in society. It's in all the little things in life. It's in the smile that we give a stranger as we walk past. It's in the coffee that you buy in the morning. It's taking your dog for a walk on the beach. It's the rain on your face on a summer's day. It is all the gratitude and the little things in life that make life so beautiful. And if you learn to appreciate that, if you learn to help others, give back to others, and help them with their own lives, and appreciate all those little things, and make them smile, then I can promise you your life will be rich and worth living. And you should never You will never even contemplate getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning with a rifle. You know what I mean? It'll
Totally.
never happen just because life is rich and it needs to be lived in that way. I just think we don't have the tools sometimes to be able to live it in that way. And hopefully conversations like this help.
Absolutely. And it's hard to zoom out sometimes, it's full on that you feel a lot, and we are hardwired to react, everything is programming us to react to everything all the time. So there's no accident there, but to actually step outside of that, it all looks a lot clearer, and you can have that breath of fresh air and have the capacity to love and to smile and to have gratitude, because I mean, gratitude is such a powerful thing, and a lot of these things, like you say, that they're common sayings, and we split them out all the time, but we don't. Sometimes it takes a lot longer for it to actually sink in and be like, oh, that's what.
Oh, exactly. When someone said to me, practice gratitude every day, I'm like, what the hell does that mean?
You lost your
I had no
marbles.
idea. I had no idea what that meant. I had no idea what healing meant. Like, people talk about healing trauma. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, just you get over a breakup and or something that's happened in your life, and you move on. That was healing to me. And I thought about it as in like a sports injury. I play a lot of footy, or used to back in the day, and like you're injured for 6 weeks. Okay, so there's a timeline on it, right? Like, injured, whether it be mentally or physically, and then you move on. You're good. You're not good. You're not good longer term. You have to understand, and it's not just about understanding those terms. It's about feeling it. It's a deeper level of feeling that you have to get to. Like, you can't just think gratitude and be thankful for the food on your plate. Like, you have to feel it, and it has to be integrated into the very fibers and the very neurology of your body. And like, sometimes it clicks for me, sometimes it doesn't. But when it does click, it is a feeling of bliss. Trust me. Like, if you get to that feeling of gratitude where you are happy for those little things in your life, then that is where you are truly happy and fulfilled with your own life. And there are moments of that we need to appreciate. For me, it's every day. It's the sunset. I love watching the sunset. Sunrise, not too much. I'm a bit grumpy in the morning, getting up that early. But sunset for me is I get to reflect. I get to think, oh, well, how did the day go? Was it shit or was it good? Okay, if it was shit, like, what am I going to do tomorrow to make it better?
Yep.
Or I love that reflection period. I love looking at the sunset and thinking that. So it'll be different for everyone, right? Like, some people might like the sunrise instead. Like, but find that point, find that trigger point, and hold on to it, because it's worth it. It is. Trust me, if you can learn how to do it, and do it every day. It is a bit of a practice thing. You can impact everyone else in that sense, and change the world in that way. You know how we're always talking about changing the world? Well, I mean, it starts with you in that positive impact. It starts with gratitude, and understanding that from a fundamental spiritual sense, rather than just the superficial level that we talk about with these words.
Yes, mate. I'm so grateful for this conversation, and the fact that we can talk about exactly carbon farming, holistic management, Bruce Pascoe, Charlie Massey, and all these beautiful spiritual things in between. And I think that's what it's all about, and if we can start encouraging more people to have these conversations and to create dialogue and start doing these little steps, it adds up to a huge thing. Dr. Mary Cole said to me once, she's the mycologist, and she said, well, many grains of sand make a beach. It's all these little things that add up, and together we can make real change. So I really, really appreciate your time today. I know you're a busy man, and for coming on at the drop of a hat. I think I only reached out last week. So and yeah, just really stoked that you can come on and be so open, and look forward to chatting more in the future, and keeping a finger on the pulse of your work and assisting in any way we can. And yeah, thanks for doing what you do, mate.
Vice versa. Thank you for having me on, and I hope that this makes an impact in some way to your audience.
Absolutely, I know it will. And if there's anything else you want to add, do so now. But if not, I'm happy to tie a bow in it there and pick it up, whenever we chat again next.
I think people are probably sick of listening to my voice, so I think I'll leave it on that positive note. I just think when you're talking about these journeys, when you think about going in your own journey, just know that it takes one small step, and one small step leads to something great, and it does take perseverance and resilience, and as Australians in particular, I think we are resilient people, and in general human beings are resilient, and we just need to dig deep, keep the people around you that you love close, and go for it, because you do come out the other side, and the other side, trust me, is a beautiful place to be.